All right, everyone. So last section we started talking about the concept of a flex box or a flexible box. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about what is referred to as the flex direction. Okay, so normally the way it works is that when we have a flex box, let's just say I'm just going to use Figma as my kind of my sketch tool here. So let's say I had a bunch of columns, okay, or a bunch of items, So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Now, normally when we create a flex box, it goes from left to right in terms of the direction that it lays stuff out, right? So, but we could also change the direction. So rather than something going from left to right, all of the items get displayed north to south. Okay, in other words, instead of going horizontally, it's going to go vertically. Okay. And what would happen is these would basically get laid out like that. All right, so let's try this out. Once again, I have a div with a couple of sections inside of it about different states on the West Coast. Okay, so let's just take a look at it. So the div is the red line. These are the sections inside of the div. I'm going to take this div and let's do display flex. Okay. Now that's going to set these up as columns with different widths depending on the amount of content. Let's add a little gap of 20 pixels. Okay. Now, once again, it's going horizontally where it's like 1, 2, 3. Maybe I'd rather have it display vertically as a column. So that would be flex direction. And I can set it to column. What that's going to do is display these items vertically on top of each other as such. Okay. Once again, they're going to take up the entire, at least by default, the entire width. Okay. If you want to set it back, you could do this as a row. Row is usually the default, but in case you want to ensure that it's going horizontally, that would be flex direction row. All right, so let's go back to my little diagram here. When you display things, when your flex direction is going like this, left to right, if you have multiple items, what you could do is there's something called justify content. And what justify content means is that you can place the content in the flexible box either at the beginning, the end, or the center. Okay. So once again, just because, why break something that works oh so well? I have this div, I have a bunch of sections, right? Let's preview that bad boy. Okay, so there's my red box. Here's my individual items. I'm going to set this to display flex. Okay. That places all of my items here. And I'm just going to, let's give it a little gap just so it's easier to see. And what I'm going to do is I want to place my content around. So I'm going to you have to apply this to the parent, and I'm going to say justify content. Okay. Now there's a couple ways I could do this. I could do flex end. Flex end means the end of the flex box, which in this direction means over here. So if I say the end of the flex box, this is the flex box. This would be the end of the flex box. So it goes at the end. The default is actually flex start, which means at the start, or typically on the left side here. Or you could also do to the center. So, oops, not flex center, just center. There we go. Now, once again, it doesn't, this will change depending on how many items you have. So if I come in here and I add items, everything still stays in the center. All right, so in the last example, everything was being displayed horizontally, okay? Let me show you an example of something though. What if I had something like, actually, sorry, yeah. What if I wanted to, what if I had something like this where I had an item. So this is this brown, the gray thing represents the container, and I want to take these rows here and I could have them at the top, the bottom, or the center. Okay. So justify content goes with the direction. Align items goes the opposite axis. So whatever axis your item, your Flexbox is going, left to right or north to south, your align items goes the opposite. Okay. So let's take a look at this. Here I have a div, and I have a bunch of sections. Okay. And let's preview this. All right. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, let's turn this div into a Flexbox, display flex. Okay, now that puts them like this. Or actually, yeah, we'll make it a Flexbox. Now, normally this is going to go this way. Let's use align items, and I can do a flex start, a flex end. Let's do flex end, and you can see everything goes. So normally, since the Flexbox goes this direction, this is your justify, and then your align goes this way. So align end means at the end, which would be here at the bottom. Align start would be at the top. Or flex start, I should say. And then if I wanted it in the vertical center, in this case, that would be center. Okay. In addition to putting all the items on the left, all the items on the right, or all the items in the center, I might want to do something like this, where maybe, let's just make this composition a little bigger. Maybe I want something like this, where all of my items are evenly distributed. Something like, this roughly. Okay. There's another way we can do that, and it's called space between, space around, or space evenly. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, once again, ain't broke, don't fix it. I got this div with a bunch of sections in it. This is what it looks like. We're going to do a horizontal one. So we're just going to use justify content. So display flex. Okay. Looks good. Now, normally this would be flex start, this would be flex end, and this would be flex center. Instead, let's do a justify content. And rather than doing this flex start, flex end, flex center, let's use space between. What that's going to do is take however many items you have and space them out. Okay. Now, you'll notice that the one at the end, so one will always go at the very beginning, one will always go at the very end, and then it'll just figure out the space in between. Okay. Now, if you go and you add items to this, it'll just readjust all of the space. You can also, so that's space between, there's also space around. Space around, what that will do, might be hard to tell, but like here, from here to here is the spacing. And what it does is it takes that spacing, divides it into half and puts half of it at the beginning and half of it at the end. Okay, so the items don't start at the exact start, or they don't end at the exact end. Some people like that, some people don't. So there's another way to do this, which is called space evenly. What it does is it has the items not at the exact start or the exact end, but it doesn't take the space and divide it evenly. It puts the same amount of space. Okay. Now that was if I was trying to place space items vertically, or sorry, horizontally. Okay. Once again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I got this div, I got a bunch of children. Okay. This is what it looks like. Now, the reason why it has this height is I added a height to it. And what I want to do is I want to space these out vertically. Okay. Now, here's the thing. So I'm going to take this div, let's make it into a display flex. Okay. Now, actually, what happens is this, by default, the height of your items is it's called stretch, or it goes all the way from the top all the way to the bottom. What we're going to do is if I was to do justify content center, that's going to do it horizontally, right? It's going to put it in the horizontal center. Now you might go, oh, well, what if I did align items to do the vertical center? That'll work for the align items will work for the start, the end, or the center. But if you tried to space them around, so for instance, let's say do space evenly, it's not going to work. Okay. So the whole space between, space around, space evenly, it only works along the justify content axis, not the align items axis. Okay, remember the axis is what direction it's going, whether it's going left to right or it's going north to south, okay, or top to bottom. Well, in this case, what I need to do is to do this vertically, I need to change the direction so that my column, instead of going right to left, is going north to south. So if I was to say flex direction, and let's change this into a column. Now, when I do this, let's get rid of this guy and set it back to justify content space evenly. Now it's starting to do that, where it's going to space everything out. Or I could do space between, which would have one at the very top, one at the very bottom, and then everything else spaces in between. And once again, if I was to come in here and add items, it's automatically going to add all that for me. Okay. All right. So that was a lot of stuff. Let's see how we can use some of this. Okay. So you guys have probably seen like a splash section of a website. So like, you know, here's this Yellow Jackets, right? I guess it's a movie or something. So what if I wanted that text to always kind of stay in the center, but then what if I change the height of this, right? So in other words, like I want the text to always kind of stay in the vertical center and the horizontal center, okay? So using CSS, we can use text align to do a horizontal center, but there's no, outside of the CSS grid or CSS Flexbox, there's no way to do a vertical center, okay? So here's what I want to show you. Let's just, you know, I have this. Let's just take a look at this. So there's a div, and then there's some text inside of that div. Okay. The div has a width, it has a height, It has a background image, which looks like a bunch of cupcakes, and then it has some text on it, and this just stylizes the text. Okay, let's just take a look at it. This is what it looks like. Okay, what I want to do is I want to make sure that this text is always in the horizontal center and the vertical center. So how could I do that? Well, what I could do is I could say, well, all right, let's take this div and let's make it into a Flexbox. Display Flex. Okay. Now this is making this into an item. Okay. So now what I need to do is let's use justify content center to center this to the middle. Okay. You can tell this is in the center because if I come and change this later on, like change it from 500 to 700, it still always remains in the horizontal center. If I want to set it to the vertical center, well, we could use align items center. That'll place that in the vertical center. So I have something in the horizontal center and something in the vertical center. Even if I later on go and change the height of this splash area, let's say I change the height from 400 to 600, you can see it always stays in the vertical center. Okay, so you can see how this could be useful. Let's do in one more. Let's say I had, I wanted to make a gallery of images. Okay, so I have this div here, and there's just these pictures of dogs. Okay. So, by setting this to, let's say I have a bunch of images and I want to make sure that the line, I want to make sure they're evenly distributed, but I don't know how many pictures there's going to be because maybe there's 3, but maybe some users add pictures or, so what I could do is, well, let's take this div and let's make it into a Flexbox, display Flex. Okay. Now, by default, these are all going to become the whole size because, that's the default. What I'm going to do is let's use justify content and let's use space even. I guess let me make this a little bit bigger. So what's happening here is these are always going to, these are becoming the height of my box. I guess I shouldn't have really given it a height. Let's not do that. Okay. But, what's nice is that I'm always kind of having this space. I guess for now, let's just get rid of that width. So this is kind of always resizing itself. And then if more dog pictures get added later, everything just kind of readjusts itself. So, at any time I can, add more images and it's fine. I also know that even if I go below the amount, this is going to just kind of be flexible. Okay.